Hello and welcome to this episode of the Act for Change podcast series. My name is Martha and I'm here with Massey and Naomi, and we are young leaders in VOYPIC. VOYPIC, which stands for Voice of Young People in Care, is the charity for children and young people with lived experience of care in Northern Ireland. The organisation was created in 1993 by a group of young people and professionals. VOYPIC's role is to promote the rights of the voice of children and young people in care and care leavers. Our vision is that every young person in care has a safe and stable and positive experience of care and are involved in the decisions about their lives. As I said before, my name is Martha and I'm 24 years old. I grew up in kinship care from 2003 until 2015 before I moved into supported living. I'm currently studying my social work degree in university. I'm now going to pass you on to Massey.
Hello, my name is Matthew. I'm 20 years old. I've been in kinship care for over 10 plus years, and I've been a young leader for VOYPIC for over 3. I've achieved so much from education with 6 GCSEs, and I also have qualifications in game development, web design, photography, and animal care.
Thank you, Matthew, and here's Naomi.
Hello, my name is Naomi and I'm 17. I've been living with my foster family for about 12 years now, and I've been involved with VOYPIC for about 6 years, and I'm currently in school completing my A-levels. We are challenging the assumption that young people in care don't do well in school, so they end up spending their life on benefits, and we want to explore that stereotype with a guest. But first, let's find out where we all stand. How was high school for you, Matthew?
For me, secondary school was a bit mix and match. Some bad steps taking place, but also gained a lot out of it as well. And anything that did go wrong didn't really seem to change my education. I still walked away from secondary school with more than the amount of the statistics and GCSEs young people would have, and I'm still continuing on.
What about you, Martha?
Yeah, high school was interesting to me because, once people found out that I was care experienced, it was I was labelled as the care experienced girl, so people didn't really expect much from me. I was bullied by pupils and then babied by the teachers and then being called teacher's pet. But I still came out with 7 GCSEs and 2 A-levels, which kind of helped me keep my mind right and prove to people that I can do it.
What about after school, Martha? What did you do?
Yeah, so after school, I went on to do 2 HNCs, Health and Social Care and Social and Community Work, and now I'm currently studying a social work degree in university.
And Matthew, what did you do?
After secondary school, I went on to further education, and I ended up doing 3 level 2 courses. When I moved on to further education, it changed completely. I realised less people didn't really care where it came from. They're more concerned with who I was and if it was genuinely just a nice person.
I had a completely different experience whenever I moved from secondary to higher education. It was more people were shocked to find out that I was care experienced because they must have had an assumption of what somebody who was care experienced looked like or didn't have as high as an education as I did, especially now doing a social work degree. They're like, well, why are you doing it if you're care experienced? It's like, I just think, why can't I do a degree that, yes, social workers have been involved in my life, but I want to also do that career. Why should my experience stop me?
My experience has been normal because I don't tell anyone that I'm in care because I don't want them to treat me different. But the people that know, like the teachers that knew, sort of treated me a wee bit different because they were more lenient with me. So if I need an extension and something, they'd give me that extension, but because I was in care, but if I wasn't, then probably not. So you both have done well in school, but do you think young people in care don't do well at school as other young people? What do you think about this, Martha?
For me, I know it's statistically proven that young people don't do as well in school. For me, I don't think people realise what affects that in young people. Like, they could be moving from different schools, different homes, and that's it's obviously going to interfere with their education. Having to make new friends, build better relationships with different teachers, and trying to catch up on the work that's being taught in that school. Yeah, I just think people need to educate themselves instead of blaming the children, they need to understand why they're falling behind.
Matthew, what do you think?
Statistically speaking, it is true that young people would do as good as others who are non-care experienced going through secondary school would. However, there would be certain reasons behind why a care experienced young person might not do as well or get as much out of education as anyone else. And that can come down to, say, they're not living in a normal household with their father or their parents. They're living in a care home and there's fights every night and they don't have time to sit down and study. It's not a quiet environment. Family drama could have some family issues that really playing up in their mind, probably making them feel down. They don't feel confident going into school the next day. They forgot to do their homework. And then going in on top of that, their teacher's going to sit and scream and shout at them about not doing the homework, saying they don't do anything, they're useless. And that's just an even bigger effect on that young person's mental health. I think when you look at it, if a young person comes out with 1 or 2 GCSEs, obviously some form of accomplishment, they've obviously achieved something there. Here in the north of Ireland, you don't need any GCSEs, any secondary education to become a firefighter or anything. Because you can go down a fire station, apply for a job, and they'll give you a firefighting exam you can take to get your qualifications to become a firefighter. And growing up, you're always told that you need 7 GCSEs to become a bin man, you need 8 GCSEs to be a firefighter, and you generally don't.
So some people say it's because young people in care are lazy and see us as troublemakers, which is why they might not do as well in school. But what do you say to these people, Martha?
I think people need to understand that it's not laziness all the time or that we're not troublemakers. A lot of young people do go through a lot of trauma before and during care. So education might not be the first thing that's on their mind in the morning. They obviously have other things that they need to worry about.
What do you say, Matthew?
I agree with Martha. I really don't think it is laziness all the time. Like I said earlier, it can come down to mental health with depression, anxiety, stress.
Matthew, do you think teachers know how to support young people in care?
Personally, I do not. I believe teachers need more training from organisations like VOYPIC to help them understand what a young person would go through on a daily basis, whether they're in a care home, whether they're in kinship care, foster care. Wee pamphlets like all schools could get. Not only would they know how to approach someone, they would be feeling down or not listening in class, but they would know how to support them later on down the line as well.
Yeah, definitely.
I don't really think teachers understand how real the emotion from young people in care go through. But I feel that they know how to handle your emotion, just not understand your experience or any experience that any young person is going through.
So it would really help if schools and the people who work in schools knew some more about what life is like in care. There are hundreds of schools across the north of Ireland, and then there are further education colleges and universities too. How important is it for staffs in school to be trained in and be aware of issues related to care? Earlier I spoke to Dr Bronagh McKee from Stranmillis University College, a true training college in Belfast, about her experience of training teachers and being aware of care. Hi Bruna, welcome to the podcast. Can you start by telling us a little about the work you've been doing at Stranmillis and the care awareness training for student teachers?
Okay, thanks Naomi. Yes, we've been doing quite a bit since we were awarded the Buttle Quality Mark Award in 2014. And I suppose the 2 main elements that I would have been responsible for at that time as the named person for care leaver students at Stranmillis was to raise awareness of the factors associated with children and young people in care amongst our student teachers, but also to provide the extra financial and pastoral supports for any students who actually ticked the box on the UCAS form and then subsequently got into Stranmillis and they had extra supports available to them. Within that, we look at vulnerable groups and thereby also care experienced children and young people. And that's over sort of the last decade, it has evolved and it has developed. And we feel we are covering a really good bit, but we're also very, very open to develop that even further, especially from yourselves. When we hear your voices, we need to know that, and we need to know where are the gaps and what can we do to fill those gaps.
Thank you, Bruna. Can you tell us about the sessions you have delivered around Care Day this year, back in February?
Yes, it was very different this year. It was interesting because we did manage to get access to the CME, the video clips, the multimedia resource, and we decided to integrate that into part of the seminar. So what we did was I delivered the gold standard lecture. Of course, it's all online this year. Some of the factors associated with why children and young people might end up in care, the different care forms and the different types of care, and of course the impact of being in care, but also about the teacher's role in supporting children and young people in care. We then did a generic survey to get some feedback on the students' views on taking part in that lecture and seminar. And I have to say, personally, my mind was just blown away at the comments. They were saying it was absolutely fantastic. They found it very impactful, was a word that cropped up a lot from the students. Shocking, needed. So it was that mixture of the realisation that, as student teachers, we think we know. What the children and young people are living with and experiencing, but really we don't always know what's going on outside of the school gates.
Why do you think it's important for trainee teachers to have this training, and should teachers in schools get this training too?
Gosh, that's a really good question. I think probably in the main, a lot of why I think it's important for student teachers is because I am an actual former foster carer myself with teenagers. And at the time I went through the assessment, I was working in the social work team and nobody wanted the teenagers. And that was just a standard statement that would have been bandied about in the office. And it was a terrible thing to say and it was a terrible thing to hear. And I thought, right, well, I'm going to go through the assessment process and I'll do a wee bit. I'll have a young person for a weekend or for a night. And I ended up doing it for a very long time. I can't remember how many had total, about 40 odd young teenagers, not all at the same time, of course. Mostly it was for respite or short term or over a weekend and, to prevent some breakdown in families, or if they were living in a residential to try and prevent any real significant issues from emerging. And I have to say, every single one of those young people that stayed with me had something to say about their teacher. It really stuck with me. It really struck. And of course, I've been in Stranmillis now. I'll be starting my 20th year this incoming academic year. It's hard to believe. And it's just always stayed with me. And I thought teachers really need to know what's going on because I want them to keep the sort of the aspirations up.
That's really positive. Finally, what do you hope the impact of the work you're doing is going to be for the children and young people in care?
I just hope that these student teachers will always remember this. I know as the years go on and it's easy to forget what you learnt in your initial teacher education, and I suppose also we have to remember it is initial teacher education, and that when they qualify and they're in schools they are continuing to develop professionally. That's probably one of the reasons why I think they still need to have this awareness raising when they're in professional practice, because what I would really, really hope for is that they will see the children in front of them as the children and young people in front of them, and they will be a human first and a teacher second, and that they must build those relationships and connections, and they must always keep the bar, raise it high. Don't lower standards just because there's a child or young person sitting in front of them who's care experienced. They have to keep those aspirations high so that they can help them succeed, because they can and they will. And you know yourself that they can and they will. But again, with the right support from the right people at the right time. And teachers have access to more children and young people outside the main caregiver than any other professional group, which is putting them in an excellent position within the realms of education.
Thank you, Dr Bronagh McKee, for speaking to us. We are now joined by Brenda Kilpatrick and Joe Irvine, who both work at VOYPIC. Brenda is the membership project worker for the My VOYPIC scheme, which is funded by Act for Change, and Joe is the participation development worker and has been supporting us with this podcast.
Thank you, Martha. I'm Brenda. I am a care experienced adult. I was in foster care from the age of 8 months. I stayed with my foster family, the one foster family, throughout all of that time, and I then availed of leaving and aftercare services because I continued on in education and continued to live with my foster family, and still consider my foster family my family today.
And Joe, can you tell us about your experience?
So I went into residential care when I was approximately 11, 12 years old. And then kinship care. But when I left care, it was before the care order came in, or the Leaving Care Act came into play. So there really wasn't as much support for leaving care. So I left care at 16.
And Joe, what about your journey in education? How was high school for you?
In terms of education, actually, my care experience did have a negative impact on my education because I left school in third year. One, because the school didn't know how to deal with someone who was in care, and two, because the issues and the reasons why I came into care were kind of the hardest thing to deal with. So education just wasn't important to me at that time. So it wasn't. So I then in third year was no longer attending school. So basically what happened to me is after I stopped attending, there was nothing really put in place for me, if I'm very truthful. It just kind of happened. Then I suppose I got involved in VOYPIC. And VOYPIC were kind of keen to support young people with their education. So they really supported me to do different bits and pieces. So getting OCNs and things like that there. They understood the importance of an education, but they also understood that at the time when I was doing my education, it wasn't the most important thing in my life. So they really supported me later on as I got older to get my education. So I now, with their support and the support of my family, I managed to then go back and get GCSEs, and then went to university, and now I have a degree. But again, it was only because of the support that I had been afforded. If I hadn't had that, I don't know where I would be today, actually.
And Brenda, was it the same for you? And what did you do after school?
My experience of school was very, very different to Joe's experience. My experience was very positive and very supported by my family, my foster family and my parents. I went to primary school, then went on to a grammar school, left from school with GCSEs, A-levels, and continued on to do a degree in politics. I think the main difference and the main reason was that I continually had the support. For me, I lived at home. I was very safe. I was very secure. I was very supported. My mum and dad were great advocates for an education and for supporting me throughout my education. And I knew that they were there, and they were, although I did have social services involvement throughout my care experience, it was very much seen by me and seen by my peers that I was at home, and my support came from my family.
What do you think makes the difference for young people in care, helping them to stay in education and getting into work?
I think the difference that was made for me, and the thing that helped me stay in education, is that I felt very safe and I felt very secure. I knew that I was safe to fail. I felt very supported, and I knew that my parents were there to advocate for me on my behalf. My foster carers were there to make sure that I did feel supported and that I felt secure and safe, and that I knew that I had them there as parents in my corner. I think that's something that might be a very different experience for Joe, if you want to talk to what you think the difference.
I think for me, it was the support afterwards. It was the acceptance that it wasn't my choice that I didn't continue with my education. I actually was quite a smart person, and I did excel in school. It was choices that others made that led me to the situation that I was in. And because of that, it was no longer important. So, having that belief and that supporting me and pushing me along. I think one of the really good things for me is part of when I worked with VOYPIC, when I started working with VOYPIC, part of my contract was that I had to do education. That for me really gave me the boost, that they believed in me enough not only to give me a job, but to support me with the education and help me build a life for myself. And I suppose when my son came along, I wanted to be more than a statistic, and I wanted to be better for him. And I wanted him to see that just because I had a care experience, it didn't set my life out. I could change and I could make what I wanted. And then because of that, that's where I am today.
Jo and Brenda are both care experience members of staff in VOYPIC. Why do you think it is important for the organisation to have care experience staff?
I think part of the reason is because we have an understanding of what it can feel like. And as you can see, me and Brenda, we come from completely different backgrounds, but we both have an experience of what it's like. And we understand, there's just an understanding that you don't even have to talk about it. When the young people know that you have a care experience, there is something about that they know that you aren't judging them, that you aren't thinking, and they know what you've been through.
I agree. I think there is an element of just having a shared experience of all knowing that you have a lived experience of care, something that I think, and I agree, Jo, we have very different experiences, and the young people that we work with have all different experiences, same as everybody from every background has a different experience. But whenever you bring in the care element, I think it's really good for people to know whenever you have a lived experience of care. Unfortunately, there's a lot of, I suppose, adult speak words and terminology that people your own age, when you're in school and when you're don't understand and don't use. And I think not having to explain yourself, and I think it's a real benefit and something that's really important. I think within VOYPIC, to keep and retain some young people with a lived experience of care within the organisation, because I think it really helps drive home that we are the voice of young people in care, and there are people, we very much support the young people and are there to work with the young people on bringing their voice forward.
There's also something about as well for the young people to be able to see that just because of their experience, it doesn't have to map out their life. They can see that, I don't like the word role model, but they can use that and they can see as a role model and say, well, look, if they've managed to achieve that, then why can't I? It can show them the other side of it, because I think it's important to recognise that the media portray a very negative view of young people that have a care experience. I mean, if you were to go on to the media, you don't really see that many positive stories. So by the young people actually seeing it on a day-to-day basis, it can show them that they don't have to be that statistic. They can be better than that.
For me, it's very much, I had a really, really positive experience, and I would love for every child who has to come into the care system to have an experience as positive as mine, and work in an organisation like VOYPIC and working with the young people. They get to see that you can go on and you can make a difference to young people in care as a care experience adult.
And finally, Brenda, can you tell us about My VOYPIC? So what it's all about and how do we join?
Yeah, thank you, Martha. So My VOYPIC is a membership scheme within VOYPIC that its aim is to unite the care experience community across Northern Ireland and to give them a voice and to let them have their say on things that affect them and their care experience. You can go to myvoypic.org and you will find out more information about the scheme there, and you can click to join and sign up there. Currently, to join, we ask that you're under 25 and either from Northern Ireland or currently live in Northern Ireland with a lived experience of care.
Thank you, Jo and Brenda, for coming on, sharing your experience in education so openly.
Thank you very much, Naomi, for inviting us on.
Yeah, thank you very much. It was great to be here.
I find that really interesting, hearing two different stories, yet somehow you can kind of relate to some of them. I can really relate to Brenda's story, but at the same time, I did struggle with my education. It did take me longer to get my degree, and I moved around schools. I don't know how it was for you, Naomi. And I think for me as well, I had more support from social services than I did my kinship family. Like they helped me get like tutors and stuff to help me achieve my GCSEs and stuff.
But for others, they don't get that opportunity.
I don't know if it is the same for all types of care, but I know in kinship and foster care, the foster and achievement and foster network to get supplies and stuff for education to help us. I think people are still quite shocked at the level of education that I have, just from being care experienced alone. I have had a few people saying like, how did you do it? Your care experience, like that's not expected of you. What are you trying to do? Are you trying to prove a point? And yes, I am trying to prove a point that it is possible. We've mentioned this before throughout the podcast. The statistics show us that young people in care generally do not do as well as in school as their non-care experienced peers. But statistics are blunt instruments and they only give us a part of the story. They also set a narrow definition of what achievement means. Can we say that a young person who has lots of disruption in their lives, perhaps being moved between 4 or 5 schools, lived with many different foster families and had numerous crises, and then achieved 2 GCSEs, has failed in education?
Remember, as we heard in the video, young people in care have the same hopes and dreams as everyone else. Think about how your words, your assumptions might impact not just how others see young people, but how they might make us see ourselves. Thank you to everyone who has taken part in this podcast.
This has been a podcast made by VOYPIC for Act for Change Together. For more information about VOYPIC, visit www.voypic.org or search for us on social media.